Ugo Bardi. You are a member of the Club of Rome, and I would like to start remembering that in 1972 a report was published for the Club of Rome which was entitled Limits of Growth, where it was mathematically demonstrated that in the 21st century both the economy and growth would collapse if growth kept being carried on the way it was. You have now written a revision of this book. Now we're in the 21st century. How are the forecasts that you did at the time?
I wrote a few years ago a book that was titled The Limits to Growth Revisited, which was a revision, a re-examination of the 1972 study, which, as you said, was a real milestone of human thought in the sense that it established a fundamental point which was not known before. It's a modern idea, the fact not so much that there are limits. That has been known for a long, long time, for centuries. Everybody knows, and they knew that there were limits. The question is how humankind adapts to limits. That's the point. And the study, the 1972 study of the Club of Rome, gave us a vision, not a very optimistic vision, I must say, of how humankind would overshoot the limits. It would not adapt to limits right away, but it would tend to surpass the limits, go higher, and then return. That's what is called a collapse. And that's the main element that came out of this study, 1972 study, which is a long time ago, many decades ago, so you don't really have to take it as a prediction. No one has what we call the crystal ball, that's the future, We see this, and like Merlin the magician, we know that in 2022 we will collapse. No, we don't have this capability. We have the capability to understand the dynamics of the evolution of the world system, which is the world economy, which is the human economy, which is how humankind will adapt, evolve, and change as a function of the limits to growth. And after almost 50 years, we can see that there was a lot that was good in this rather ancient report. If you take it for what it was, it's not an oracle, not a miracle, not a magic, but a vision, a warning. And that warning is turning out to have been well placed because we are clearly overcome the limits now. And we are in a difficult situation because returning to be at the right level, to a compatible level with the limits, may be rather painful, and it will be more painful the more we wait.
One of the problems we're facing now is the oil peak. And I would like you to tell me why the most important countries are now resorting to schist oil, because that doesn't sound too good, does it?
There are only forces that push the system in a certain direction. There are forces and reactions. That's the essence of the method which is behind the study, which is called the limits to growth. The system is pushed in a certain direction, and the system reacts, tries to stay where it is. It's normal. If you allow me, I push you a little bit, you react, try to stay where you are. If I push you stronger, you react more. And is it a problem? Maybe it's a problem. If you want to stay where you are, it is a problem that I'm pushing you away from where you are. But if I push you very strongly, you will have to move. And so that's the same thing with the economy. The economy, we always say we face problems. Problems, problems, problems. We have the problem that we do not grow fast enough. And the politicians think that it is their problem. Do you know the story of the ant, the little ant that fell on the head of the elephant? The little ant was convinced that it was driving the elephant. But the elephant goes where the elephant wants to go. It doesn't matter if you have an ant on your head. So peak oil, the production peak of oil is a necessary condition of the fact that petroleum or crude oil or fossil fuels in general exist in limited amounts on this piece of rock that we call the Earth. So this limitation is a push to the system. The system will adapt. It's not a problem. There is no problem. There is only adaptation. So right now we're going to see, and we're already seeing the production stabilizing and starting to go down. Is it a problem? Maybe. If we want to stay the way we are, it is a problem. But we cannot stay where we are. Nobody, nothing, the whole universe, everything moves. And we cannot stay still. Nothing stands still in the universe. So the peak of petroleum is pushing us in some direction, and we have to follow. There is no other way to do it. We can go in style, slowly, adapting, or we can try to resist. Like, excuse me if I'm using you as an example, but if I push you very strongly, suppose that I push you very, very strongly, then you try to resist. But if you really try to stay, then you may hurt yourself, might hurt you. If you instead you let yourself go, then nothing bad will happen to you. It's the principle of Japanese martial arts. You know, judo, you push you don't resist. You move, you make me fall. That's the way things work normally in the universe, except human beings are a little bit more stubborn than most creatures on this planet. So they try desperately to resist, and sometimes they hurt themselves. So we are having peak oil right now. It's coming. It will have big consequences. It may be painful if we don't start right now to adapt. It may be very painful if we refuse to adapt. It may be just a way to go. It may be a part of the evolution if we start now to adapt.
The climate change crisis is affecting everything, but it's like we don't quite believe it. The crisis is also arriving to the international institutions, which have lost all their capacity and their credibility, and they can't really act on the world problems that are affecting all of us. Is that something that concerns you?
A little, yes. I think we should all be a little bit worried about that. But you see, the spirit of the Club of Rome, which sponsored this book back in 1972, the club still exists. Of course, it is not the same people. People changed, but for instance, the authors of the book are still alive. One of them is dead. Dennis Meadows was one of the main authors, and she died a few years ago. But the other is still alive and active, and they're still pushing this set of ideas. There is a new generation of people in the Club of Rome who are pushing the same idea. The idea is that you do your best to adapt. Already in the 1970s, the question, the problem, if you want to call it like that, of the climate change had been identified in a certain way, not completely, but there was something in the model that we discovered later on was related to climate change. So whatever we do on this planet, we create change. And as I said, excessive change may be painful. So the idea, the initial idea when this book was written, was to manage the planet in such a way that not so much to avoid change, but to make the change as painless as it was possible. Unfortunately, I have to say, and you see that easily, that the planet is not, people are not reacting so elegantly to the perception of a crisis. So you have big changes, and the reaction of people is to stay where they are. We don't want to change. That's especially pathologic with American presidents. Have you noticed that? You remember Mr. Bush Sr., he said, the American way of life is not negotiable. It means there cannot be change. We don't want to change. We will not tolerate change. And if you force us to change, we'll bomb you. And nevertheless, no matter what the President of the United States says, change occurs. There's no way to avoid that. Even Mr. Trump says, we shall make America great again. I mean, he realized, the American way of life is not anymore what it used to be. So I want to go back, which is worse. One thing is to try to avoid change. It's even worse when change has taken place, to try to return where you were, because clearly you could not stay there, but you want desperately to go there. It's the same for climate change. Is a big change. But people are reacting by fighting each other. You see? And this is a way to make change painful, because in addition to doing very little to avoid the change, you also fight each other and you cause pain to each other, and that's I'm afraid that's a problem. If you like to call it a problem, this is the human attitude is a problem. And anyway, climate change is probably the most difficult, most terrible, most complex, most threatening, most horrible problem faced by humankind, and I'm afraid that we are already past the point in which you can avoid change, because also climate change is often seen in such a way, let's avoid change, it's too late. We are going in some direction, we will have to adapt to a different planet. We should try as much as we can, while we still can, to limit the change, but we cannot avoid it. We cannot avoid it because there is you can see that the whole planet is moving, is changing, transforming itself to another planet. As you say, we could say this is a science fiction. We live in a science fiction movie, taking a spaceship, we land in another planet. Then you are there. Do you like it? Maybe not. But maybe you run out of fuel and you have to stay there. And so whether we like or not, we live already in a different planet. And the planet will be more different in the future. And if we are able to slow down the change a little bit, it will be less painful. But I'm afraid at the point at which we are, from the data we have, some pain cannot be avoided. But there are many things that we can do. I am one of, there are some people say that humankind will not survive. I'm not among them. We will survive, but the transition, the change is always a challenge, but also an opportunity. Humankind is seeing a big opportunity to change itself and to do something better.
Quería preguntarle también por la energía nuclear.
I would like to ask you about nuclear energy, and not because President Trump pressed the button, but because it's not quite clear why China can keep throwing polluted water into the ocean, and institutions like the Club of Roma could accept that.
Doesn't have some stated position on nuclear energy. Some of our members think that nuclear could help. Some are even optimistic about nuclear. My personal opinion is that it was a bad idea from the beginning, but again, when you speak of limits, you have to understand that nuclear does not allow you to overcome the limits. It's not in the limits because the Earth is a ball of rock floating in space, and that's it, more or less. People say we will go to Mars. Well, yeah, maybe we can, but it is an illusion to think that a technological miracle can help us stay where we are. If we were able to develop new, wonderful, miraculous, incredible technologies, they may avoid some problems, but they will create new ones. So nuclear has produced energy, there is no doubt. During the past 50 years or so, nuclear has been producing energy at the price of a few accidents, but you could argue that the nuclear accidents have not been so bad as the disaster which is now the climate change, which is caused by fossil fuels. Fossil fuels have been much more damaging than nuclear energy, by all means. So you could say that nuclear energy is relatively benign. It's not so bad as fossil fuels. The problem is that we cannot substitute fossil fuels with nuclear because nuclear energy is also limited. As it is now, the nuclear system needs uranium resources, and that's those resources, mineral resources of uranium, are limited. You don't have infinite uranium. You don't have infinite energy. At the beginning of the nuclear age, people got taken in by this idea, energy too cheap to meter. It was so cheap that you would have it for free. It didn't work. Right now, we have a big problem in terms of mineral uranium. It is not sufficient. We would need very large investments to create a flux, a production of uranium sufficient just for the park of nuclear plants that we have now. And that's so expensive that it's unthinkable, also considering that we have to dismantle the old plants, which are now 50, 60 years old, and this is expensive. So overall, sometimes people are still enthusiastic about this idea. Well, if we were to go back to nuclear, then things would be better. It's like Mr. Trump saying, we make America great again. So we make energy great again if we go back to nuclear energy, but it doesn't work. You cannot go back. Life goes only in one direction. And unlike in video games, you have only one life.
What's happening in the financial system and in the world economy so that we have the technology to develop clean energies and not basing everything on carbon, but it's not being done. What's happening? What's stopping that?
That's a great question. Thank you very much. You hit exactly the right point. If we want to make the transition less painful, what do we have to do? We have to anticipate the transition. If you start braking a car early enough, you don't hit the wall. So what we're seeing now is we are gradually running out of fossil resources, and in addition we have the problem of the damage done to society by climate change. So we have to anticipate the problem. We have to invest now for the future, which is difficult for human beings. Human beings, as you know, are creatures who work for immediate satisfaction. And so we ask them to invest for a future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in the future. It's not so easy. But this is the purpose of the financial system. The financial system should invest resources that we have now for the future. And very correctly you asked me, is it doing that? Is it? No, unfortunately, only in part, not enough. With some colleagues, we performed calculations, a model of how much we should spend if we wanted to make a transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy smoothly without suffering any loss of energy supply. And the result is that we should invest more than 10 times more than what we invest now. So you see the problem? It is what we call the path of the sower. Sower is people sowing, como se dice en español, el seminador. El seminador, el camino del seminador, the sower's way. What does a peasant do? Every year, he sows grain, uses it, eats it, but this peasant have to save a little seed, a little grain, a seed for the next harvest. That's investment. Peasant is an investor, invests in the future, in the next harvest. If you eat all your seed, then next year you die of starvation. And the same is for energy. We have some energy production now. We have to invest a fraction of it for the future. Otherwise, we run out of it and we die. And we are doing it, but only in part, which is not so bad. We are doing it. We are going in the right direction, not fast enough, which means the transition will occur. The transition, we are moving to a better world, to a cleaner world, to a world where energy will be available, will be free, will not be polluting, and possibly, I think, as a more just and socially equitable world. The problem is that we are not going in that direction fast enough. At least according to my calculations.
¿Cuánto podemos subsistir así?
How much longer can we survive by
¿Cuántas
that?
décadas podemos aguantar más este tipo de crecimiento?
How many decades can
Y,
we
dígame,
bear this kind of growth?
está Donald Trump, como hemos dicho, en Estados Unidos, está Putin en Rusia,
Like now that we have
está
Donald Trump in the
Xi Jinping
US,
en
Putin in
y todos los demás
Russia
que
and
llevan un
the
poco
Chinese
al rebufo
president,
de una locura, le
and
pregunto.
everybody else is kind of going in the wake of
This
this
is a
madness.
difficult
Is
question.
it?
As we could say that the world is now a little bit dangerous for everybody, but as I said, there are some forces which are moving us in a certain direction. So there are Mr. Trump, Mr. Putin, the various heads of state. They think they have power, but I think eventually they are not really moving so many things. The world is moving by itself in a certain direction. I have more the impression that it's the accumulation of pushing from many small people like you and like me who's moving things in the right direction. Then Mr. Trump says, he sends tweets, but I don't think there is a little problem now. We can push little things, but Mr. Trump has a red button that absolutely, positively, he should never push, but he could.
Esperemos, esperemos. Dígame, ¿no es usted muy amigo de la tecnología? No es usted muy amigo de la tecnología.
Perdona, no. Yo soy tecnólogo como formación. Hablo español. Perdóname. I am a technologist by formation. I have been working for 30 years in technology. I think I could say I know a little about technology. Now, I can tell you, most of the technology development, what we call research and development, is you pay some money and you get back in a good profit for what you paid. You improve a process which already works, and you can improve it. My contribution to the world as a technologist has been to improve a number of processes which were already working. I think my main success as a technologist has been to improve the efficiency of gas turbines. A little, less than 1%, but it's a lot of money. It's a good profit, you can do that. But this technology does not change the world. This is like craftsmanship. The problem or the opportunity or the characteristic of technology is that when it is successful, it is disruptive, changes things brutally. You probably heard the story of the Polish cavalry charging the German tanks during the Second World War. One technology against another. It is not true. The Polish cavalry never charged the tank, but it could have happened. And if you are a cavalryman, you have your lance, and you find yourself charging against a tank, maybe some doubt that, what am I doing exactly? You would not do that. That's technology. Technology changes things. Some technologies are brutal changes, and that happens. Like nuclear energy is a brutal change, like fossil fuels are a brutal change. It passed 200 years ago, the world was completely different than it is now. We are doing what we are doing now, we are what we are now because we have this disruptive change caused by the fossil fuel technology. Now, your question was, should we trust technology to save us? And that's the standard vision. If you read the newspapers, the media, the television, politicians, they'll say, we have a problem. We throw some money at the scientists, and the scientists will solve the problem. If you allow me as a modest opinion of somebody who has worked for many years on technology, it doesn't work that way. Throw as much money in as you want, but technology normally worsens the problem. As I told you, I developed technology that improves the efficiency of technology, or gas turbines, but did it change anything? No, because you can improve gas turbines of 1%, but if you run out of oil, turbine will not work, or natural gas. So you need a disruptive breakthrough changing technology, and we are going to have them, absolutely. Renewable energy is a disruptive technology, it changes things, but you don't have to think that renewable energy solves problems. It changes everything. Once you start depending on renewable energy, the world is completely different. It's a different form of energy, different distribution, different cost, different social constraints, different everything. So, technology is like black magic. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you have to be very, very careful with black magic because you don't know whether you may try to summon a mouse and then what comes out of your hat is a crocodile.
Le voy a hacer la última pregunta.
I'm going to ask you the last question.
Dígame.
Do you think in the universal basic
Well,
income?
the crisis of 2008, it's a very complex issue. I discuss it in my next book, which is coming this month. It's titled The Seneca Effect, from the name of Seneca, the Roman philosopher. And there are many stories which have to do with the capability of the system to crash down abruptly. This is what I call in this book the Seneca collapse. The philosopher Seneca was probably the first who said in a letter, Seneca said, the world is already sufficiently difficult, the world, if ruin were to come at the same speed as growth. And he said, but I noticed that ruin is much faster than growth. And that's what I called the Seneca ruin or the Seneca collapse. The 2008 crash was one of these cases because the financial system is a complex system which dominated by changes, internal changes, and this system can go through these rapid collapses. And that was a terrible collapse by all means. In this case, it was possible to return, come back from chaos with some damage, though. As you correctly said, many people became poor. That's a trend that we see everywhere in the world, independently of the specific collapse of 2008. The data are very clear. Every year we have more poor people, a lot more poor people, and a few more rich people, which is, I think, not a positive development, but it is what we are seeing. So, some people who know better than me, also in this study group, which is the Club de Roma, we're discussing these issues. Some people say, well, we are poised to another collapse. It may be. If you allow me, I would not myself say if we are going to have another financial collapse soon. I can only tell you that some people I know, who know much more than me, whom I deem very intelligent, they say that we are going to have a big collapse very soon. And then we will see. Change, as I said, is unavoidable.
I know you're very demanding. Would you have liked to answer some question that I haven't asked you? Is there any question you have missed?
Yeah, good question. This is I was supposed to answer questions, so
No,
I don't know. I mean, we keep going. Don't worry. Take it easy. It's let me ask you a question. Do you know who the Stoics are?
¿Sabe quiénes son los estoicos?
Bueno, sí, sé lo que sé
Yeah.
además lo que es el estoicismo y
I
lo
know what
practico.
stoicism is.
The Roman way of seeing the world, the philosophy. I see myself and many other people, also in the Club of Rome, but not necessarily, we tend to see ourselves as the Stoics, modern Stoics. And we see the same problem, the same situation that the Stoics at the time of Seneca, at the time of Epictetus, at the time of Horatius, they had. This world was rapidly changing and not for the best. And so they took an attitude which is explained by Epictetus. He said, change the things that you can change and accept the things that you cannot. And we try to do the same.
Ugo Bardi, muchísimas gracias por contestar a nuestras preguntas.
Thank you very much for
Bienvenido a
answering our
Barcelona.
questions.
Gracias.
And welcome to Barcelona.
Placer de ser Barcelona.
¿Estamos?